I woke up in a cold sweat after a dream that felt far too vivid to be a construct of my mind. My surroundings were pitch black, but I smelled pine cones and trees all around me. It didn't matter that I couldn't see much. I knew I had to keep going. There was something waiting for me, or someone. Nobody had seen me leave. I'd climbed out of the window. I was afraid, but I didn't stop walking. It was as if I was being controlled by external forces. Suddenly, two arms grabbed me from behind.
"Not you! They promised you would be safe,"
my mother whispered. I had forgotten about this experience, possibly because I wasn't entirely myself when it happened. My mother brought me back home where a police car was already waiting. They'd been looking for me for hours. She had saved me, but back then I didn't know from what. This must have been more than 15 years ago. Now I know that I was following my cousin's call. "Do you have some water?" The unfamiliar voice pulled me back to reality. I still hadn't fully grasped the events of the last day. Luke and I talked to my parents, who seemed like they were going through some sort of manic episode. Now I was in a hotel, and my brother and his family were in the room next to me. And I was here with my cousin. No, but I can get you some from the sink in the bathroom." He looked miserable. His eyes were bloodshot and his dark hair, which resembled mine, was going in all directions. He was lying in the bed, while I was sitting on the sofa. I must have dozed off on it sometime early this morning. He slowly nodded. Luke had been hesitant about leaving me here with him, but I convinced him that, after being drugged and tied up in our basement room, he was probably lacking the energy to hurt me. Besides, we were the ones who got him out, and not without paying a high price. I still have the look on my father's face ingrained into my mind when he said that our star was next door. His eyes, they opened wider than they humanly should be able to. His grin was so bright that I thought the corners of his mouth might rip. That excitement quickly wore off, however, after I had pulled out the knife from behind my back. It might have been a rash reaction, but for whatever goddamn reason I chose fight at that moment instead of flight. "Max, stay calm," Luke whispered, but I couldn't. My entire body was shaking, and then the most surprising thing happened. My mother started laughing, hysterically. Then slowly she got up from the tiny plastic chair she was sitting on, all while still laughing, and then my father chimed in and laughed even harder. For a split second, I almost believed that my entire family was playing a prank on me, but then my mother started talking.
"Leave the show for the producer, dear. She'll be here soon. I even give you permission to slit my throat,"
she said with tears in her eyes.
"Or your father's, but it should at least be taped, honey."
I was frozen and almost didn't realize that my father had been walking up to me, his hands reaching for the knife, until Luke jumped in and punched my father in the face, something I had never believed I would witness. My father, who had grown old over the years, fell back, and for a moment, I felt pity. Even after all they've revealed about themselves, I still felt bad for them. I still felt attached to them. After the punch, things were going really fast. Luke had taken the knife from my hand and was shouting at my mother to stay back. He walked up to my dad, but instead of helping him up, he grabbed the keys that he had tied to his belt. He threw them over to me, but of course they fell to the ground. That's when I unfroze. I grabbed the keys and I tried a few until one fit the other door in the basement. Inside, lay, falling in and out of unconsciousness. It was immediately clear to me that it was him because my grandpa was right. We looked very alike. Luke shouted some more things at my parents and helped me pick up our cousin. Together we carried him upstairs. My parents didn't move, but as we walked up the stairs, I heard my father say, "You're making a mistake. They will find you." We were on our way to the hospital when Lay started waking up more and more. He begged us not to go to the hospital, but instead to drive to some hotel as far away as possible. Luke didn't question him. After picking up a clueless Jacob and Ellie, we were on the road. On the drive there, Luke tried his best to explain everything to Jacob. He left out some parts, which I assume was because of Lay.
So, I suppose they used us as bait. They said they wanted to plan something for your birthday. Recreate a party they had when you were kids or something. I shouldn't have gone along,
Jacob said after he had been silent for a long time, probably processing the insane story.
I can't believe what you guys have been through.
He continued with a hurt undertone, either because Luke had kept this from him or because he genuinely felt bad for us. When we reached the hotel, Lay immediately passed out on the bed. I sat down on the sofa, making sure he kept breathing while listening to Luke's and Jacob's muffled voices next door. But now, Lay was awake. Finally, because we hadn't been able to ask him much, and I was damn ready for some answers. After texting Luke, the three of us were sitting on the bed, almost as if we were just boys, cousins hanging out. But I didn't even remember this cousin. To me, he was a stranger.
I swear, everything is getting a shitty reboot, even our murder show,
Lay casually said after a while. How can you be joking right now? Luke asked. He shrugged.
You get desensitized after a while. Can you tell us more about this show? I asked. Do you want the short or the long version?
Maybe start with the short, I said, getting nervous. He shrugged.
Well, I don't remember much about my parents' death or life before it. To be honest, I don't remember either of you, and I didn't even know you existed. I grew up with Grandma and Grandpa. When I was 11 or so, I saw an ad looking for actors for a new TV show. No idea why, but for some reason I thought that was exactly what I wanted to do.
He sighed.
I thought there was no other way I'd ever get cast. I was some kid from some boring-ass small town. Grandpa took me to auditions, and he had no clue what this thing was about, and for some reason, I actually got the part. Everything else from that time is kind of foggy. There was a couple of other kids who I recently got back in touch with, and some motherfucker named Warley.
Luke and I stayed silent, listening to every word.
The next part might seem a little absurd to you.
He took a deep breath.
This show had an awful effect on kids, and after watching it, they would run away from home. It was some kind of sick mind control from the production company. I know this sounds insane, but they took all those kids. I don't know how many of them died.
He looked at us, waiting for a reaction, probably thinking that we wouldn't believe a word. But we'd seen the tapes and had felt the effect they had.
Did you ever go to the police?
He shook his head.
No. I suggest you don't either. That risk is too high. They'll just send you to the producers. They have powers you can't possibly imagine.
But our parents said that the adult in the show is dead. That's Warley, right? Luke asked.
It doesn't matter. He didn't matter. They can kill and replace any one of us. And to be honest, I don't believe there is anything they cannot do, and running away from them is next to impossible. A while back, my friends and I had a terrible encounter with them. And then again, but we were able to fight them. Now for a while, I thought I was fine, but it never seems to end. And now they somehow got my uncle to lure me back in?
I got up from the bed and started pacing around the room.
How the hell did my parents get you into our basement? I asked.
He looked at the ground.
I don't have any family left besides Grandpa. When they reached out to me, I had no idea that they were connected to Warley, that they were insane.
He took another long breath.
Look, I tell you everything else I know about this, but first I need to know how you are all connected to this.
Luke and I exchanged a look, one that said, "Can we trust him?" But then I thought about it. We could have been the ones in his place. We were lucky. They chose him instead. Luke must have been thinking the same because, after some silence, My brother started speaking and told Lay everything that had happened after we watched the tapes. When Luke was done, we both looked at Lay. He had been quiet all throughout, but now he opened his mouth to speak.
So, this didn't start with the auditions. It has been determined since I was a baby, and your parents knew everything.
I guess maybe yours did too, Luke said.
Did you tell your parents before looking for the tapes, the regular ones?
He asked, looking at me.
I nodded. And you'd never seen the other ones before, so they probably planted them there for you to find. But why?
He was scratching the stubbles on his face that didn't quite yet make a beard.
Did you feel anything when you watched them?
Yeah, they made me feel sick and overall a little strange, I said, my mind racing. I looked over at Luke, but he seemed frozen. Cold sweat was forming on his forehead. Lay sighed.
If those tapes were made with some connection to the production company, they weren't normal. Watching them might do stuff to you in your mind. Maybe it already did. My guess is that your parents wanted you to see them, and we should find out why before it's too late for you.